Hi there. Welcome back. Coach Barnabas, episode 43. And this one is the third installment of a little series of three videos where I'm talking about experiences I had in my life where uh, the first two videos were episodes 41 and 42 were stories where I quit something that I loved very much based on the behaviors and actions of other people and how they affected me. And I had lost my joy, my love for something that I really did love and take joy in. And I walked away from those things, if not permanently, at least temporarily, and paid some consequences for that. Sometimes I have regrets, sometimes not so much, or I rethink it. But ultimately, I did learn a lot from those experiences. But this time, I want to focus on something where there was a time when I was personally mistreated, but I chose not to give up. And it's yeah. Let's just kind of get into it. This was 1983, 1984. I'm 18, 19 years old, probably 19 by this time, and a very new Christian. Okay. I'd only been a Christian maybe a year, thereabout, give or take. And going back to the sports theme, um, because the first two videos, what the first one was about baseball, centered around baseball. The second one was based around my experience in basketball. This one now, I'm out of high school, like I said, about 19 years old. And a friend of mine at my church was coaching the high school boys, I think it was a freshman or JV team. And he had asked me to help him out. I said, I'd be happy to. I'd love to, because I loved the game and I was good at it. So I was kind of his assistant coach helping out. And it was a local Christian high school. And the way the practices were structured was the girls' team practiced ahead of the guys' team. Okay. So, um, we'd arrive at the gym and kind of stretch out, get ready for practice as the girls were wrapping up their practice. And okay, whatever. And then we take the floor and we do our practice and do our thing. Well, somewhere along the line, one of the administrators of the school thought she saw something that not only didn't happen, but it was physically impossible. And I'll explain that in a second. Because I thought nothing of it. We were just going about practice, doing our thing, nothing big. But then one night at church, I don't can't remember if it was like a midweek thing or a Sunday night. The details are fuzzy, but it was kind of traumatic for me. And my parents and I were called into an office, and I was being confronted in front of like leadership of the church because they were associated with the school. And I was accused by a woman administrator from the school of saying I inappropriately touched one of the girls in the basketball team. And this is where it's like I say, not only did it not happen, but it's physically impossible. What she accused me of doing, which in and of itself it's not like it was sexual. It wasn't. But she accused me of grabbing a girl by the hips and lifting her in the air. I guess she said, I think you're trying to help her shoot a layup or something like that. Now, if the girl were 5 or 6 years old, I could probably do that. But this girl was a teenager, and she was probably the biggest girl on the team. So she wasn't much smaller than I was at the time. So if you've ever tried to pick somebody up by, and for a woman, the center of gravity is the hips. So, she's basically saying I grabbed her by the hips and lifted her in the air like this. And try to do that. Try to do that to somebody who's essentially an adult, or at least, a late stage teenager, 16, 17, 18 years old. It wasn't possible. And I certainly didn't do that. And, maybe I gestured this. I don't even know. I thought it through in my head 1,000 times since then, because I was just like stunned that this is all happening. And again, they weren't accusing me of doing something inappropriate, because you see things in the news now about inappropriate behavior between, okay, won't go into that. But for some reason, they considered this super scandalous, and my side was absolutely not going to be listened to, accepted, or anything like that. And I even tried to defend myself, like, I'm not sure what you're talking about, but you're I couldn't physically do that to anybody of that age, that size, to do what you're saying I did. And nobody stopped to say, you're right. It's just like, well, she said she saw it, so that's the way it is. And I don't even remember what came from it, to be honest with you. I honestly don't. It's such a blur. But I do know that my parents were so upset by this that we ended up leaving the church, and we decided we are going to go to a church that was more local to us, because I've mentioned in previous videos that church was like half hour, 40 minutes away from where we lived. And they were so upset by the way I was treated, that they just couldn't support it anymore. They were very disappointed, very upset. And I'm a new Christian. Okay. And I'm like, what in the world? I had no idea what was going on. We started going to another church, and within a year or so of being there, I was again kind of put in a leadership role where I was helping out our youth pastor. I had also started directing a small choir there. So I was kind of in a layman sort of way involved in leadership there. By this time, I'm probably 20 years old, something like that, 20. And I'm there one day during the week. I think I'm pulling music for the choir or something like that, and having a conversation with one of the associate pastors. He and I are the only two in the office, the only two at the church at the time, and I don't remember. I don't remember the conversation, what led up to this, but he looked at me with disdain in his eyes. And this is what he said to me, and I'll never forget this. This is verbatim exactly what he said to me. He says, I don't know, there's something about you. I don't know what it is, but when I find out what it is, I'm going to nail you to the wall with it. I mean, that's verbatim what he said. It is etched in my memory, etched in my mind. And again, I was absolutely stunned, because it's like, and now I'm getting to the point to where it's like, am I an awful person? Is there something about me? I mean, I literally was like, you know, people are saying this about me, people in leadership, in spiritual leadership, saying this. I have no conflicts. I have no interpersonal conflicts with people. Nobody complaining about me. Um, I got along great with people. But here now is the second time in a whole other church, and baselessly, somebody just, an associate pastor saying, there's something about you. I don't know what it is, but when I find out, I'm going to nail you to the wall with it. I was being threatened, and nothing ever came of it, but it was this private moment with this guy. And that's what he said to me. And there was just anger in this accusation toward me, that just shocked me. In a sense, I felt nailed to the wall, and nothing ever came from it, but it obviously affected my relationship with that person. And I still tried to do my thing. And I stayed in that church for a number of years, and continued in leadership, and developed great friendships and relationships with people who came on board, and as the church grew and everything. Nothing ever manifested beyond that in a negative way at all. But it wrecked me. It really devastated me in terms of my confidence. Is there something about me? Because I'm a very introspective guy. And so rather than lash out and say, oh, yeah, buddy, or something like that, I was like taking total inventory of my own life and trying to figure out what it is about me, and try not to let it affect me. Um, and I remember going home confused, upset, in a lot of different things. And I remember saying this prayer. And again, this is verbatim, and I'm not necessarily proud of the verbiage, but this is exactly what I said. I'm just being honest with you. I prayed to God and I said, God, your people suck. Your people suck, but I love you and I am going to stick with you come what may. And I'm not going to let people keep me from my relationship with you. So, unlike the two examples in the previous videos, uh, I was determined not to turn my back on who I love, the object of my affection, in this case, God, because of the behavior of somebody who, you know what, is just as flawed as I am. And I say that all of this has been leading up to this, which is what this channel is all about in terms of trying to feed you encouragement, is that maybe you've had bad experiences in your life. Maybe you've had bad experiences in your family, in your job, wherever it may be. And maybe you even have bad experiences with people in your church or at a church. And you've decided, I don't want anything to do with that. I'm walking away. You know, God may be cool and all that, but dang, I don't want anything to do with these people. They're awful. And like I said, at times, you know, God's people suck. And, you know, there have probably been times where I've inspired somebody to say that about God's people. You know, maybe I've been one of the sucky people at times. Um, but the point is that I didn't quit. I didn't give up. I didn't walk away from God. I was able to distinguish between who God is and how perfect and loving and merciful and graceful and that He is, um, and separate that from people who are flawed, who are imperfect, who are in their own journey, who are struggling with their own things. Maybe they have their own insecurities. I don't know. But that's the thing is we all have our stories. We all have our flaws and imperfections. And sometimes we lash out and we take things out on people who don't deserve it, or we think we know something about them that is baseless, or we just mistreat them in some way for some reason that's inexplicable. We can do a lot of damage to them, or we could be damaged by them. But we have to, the thing is don't give up. Don't give up on your faithfulness to Jesus. Don't give up on the church, because those people are few and far between. In the fact that I had to go back, this was probably in the mid 80s. Okay. So the fact that I'm going back roughly 40 years to share this story with you, and the time before that was a few years even before that. So, you know, 40 some odd years ago. The fact that I'm having to go back that far, and I've been in church all these decades in between, I've never had another experience, anything like that before. So these were kind of one and done type situations. It did happen early in my Christian life, and it would have been very easy to say, man, if this is what Christianity is all about, I don't want anything to do with it. But I thank God that even in my youth and inexperience with Christianity, with these types of churches and everything, that I didn't just throw the baby out with the bathwater and say, if this is what it's all about, this is now my second church and the second time I've had a really bad experience with somebody, that I didn't give up, that I recognize that God is still wonderful. He's beautiful. He's been nothing but good to me. But sometimes people are not. Okay. Um, and that can happen. And it shouldn't happen, but it does. And if you think that Christians are hypocrites because they go to church and sometimes treat people this way, I can see where you're coming from. However, um, church is exactly where people like that ought to be. Because you know what? If they're there, if they're in church and they're reading the Bible, if they're listening to good teaching, um, God's going to speak to them. He's going to get a hold of them. And that's exactly where they need to be, to have their eyes open and their hearts opened to the way they treated others or mistreated others. Maybe you've been mistreated, and maybe they'll come to you and ask your forgiveness. Maybe they won't. The thing is, you have to forgive them anyway, whether they do or don't. You've got to let go of it. And I had to do that in those situations I mentioned to you. I had to let go and forgive them. Otherwise, it was just going to consume me, and they're living on their lives all completely unknowing of how their words and their actions affected me. And I'm just thankful I didn't become a statistic and just give up on the whole thing and walk away. So that these three videos all are kind of, that's the moral of the story. That's the foundation of it all. Is maybe you've had a bad experience in a church, and maybe people have mistreated you. I don't know. You can fill in the blanks yourself. It's your story. But I just encourage you to stay rooted, stay true to God. Don't give up on fellowshipping in a church. Have grace, have mercy, even where it's not been extended to you. Show it. Show love, show kindness. Ask God, just, is there any wicked way in me? Is there something in me? Create in me a clean heart, renew a right spirit within me, right? And that became my focus. God, show me if there's something within me. Is there something I don't see that other people see? And you know what? Through the years, he's done exactly that. There's something about you that needs to be softened, that needs to be sanded down because it's a little rough. And he's been faithful to correct me when I've needed it. So there are times where it's all me, and there's times where it really wasn't. But in all things, it's like, I'm going to stay true to Jesus. I'm going to stay the course, and I'm going to keep walking with Jesus. I'm going to keep fellowshipping with in the church and being around people and not giving up. And I'm glad I didn't. I have no regrets. Sometimes with the other two stories, I look back with some regret. Should I have done this? Should I have not done that? Whatever. But in this, not an ounce of regret. I've never looked back and said, man, I wish I had walked away. I wish I had punched him in the nose. None of that. Not once. And even, like I said, that prayer where it's like, okay, my language was a little, I didn't swear, but to say, people suck. Okay. That might be a little aggressive for some of you, but that's how I felt. And that's how I spoke at the time. And I think God honored that, and honored the fact that, yeah, you know what? Sometimes people do. They really do. But come to me, all who are weary and heavy laden, I will give you rest. And God was my refuge, my shield, my fortress, all those things that he promises in his word to be. He was that for me, and he continues to be. So take refuge in him. Don't give up. Don't let somebody else derail you from pursuing God, because you know what? They're in their own place. They're pursuing God too, and maybe God needs to take out the old holy sandpaper and soften some of their rough edges too. Could happen. Pray for them, but forgive them. So that's my message. Thank you for following along. I hope you've enjoyed this little series. I hope you've taken something from it that you can apply to your life, and encourage you to keep moving forward and keep faithful to him, because he's faithful to you. So thanks again for joining me today. Be encouraged, be an encourager. I look forward to talking again very soon. Take care.